person isn't some private entity traveling unaffected through time and space as if sealed off from the rest of the world by a thick shell. Living for 100 or for 100,000 lives sealed off like that not only isn't living, but it is impossible. In our lives are present a multitude of phenomena. Just as we ourselves are present in many different phenomena, we are life, and life is limitless. Perhaps one can say that we are only alive when we live the life of the world, and so live the sufferings and joys of others. This is a section of Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Miracle of Mindfulness, and it really points to the interconnectedness of all things that is revealed through simply being. As Thich demonstrates, we are not some separate entity from the world around us, even though that is often how it can feel. Through being in the present moment, we are able to understand the way that infinite phenomena are connected to each other. We aren't truly alive until we are able to live the life of the world. So, I start this episode with this simple question. Are you here now? All right, welcome to the I Am Here Now podcast. Today we have a special book breakdown in which we are breaking down The Miracle of Mindfulness by Thich Nhat Hanh. When most people think of mindfulness, they picture stillness, quiet, peaceful moments alone. But for Thich Nhat Hanh, mindfulness was not just something you practice. It was a way of living, a way of breathing, walking, washing dishes, even loving, with your full attention. Thich Nhat Hanh, or Thai as his students lovingly called him, was a Vietnamese Zen master, poet, peace activist, and one of the most influential spiritual teachers of our time. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, calling him an apostle of peace and nonviolence. In 1975, when in exile from his home country, he wrote The Miracle of Mindfulness, a short, simple, and powerful guide that helped introduce the Western world to what it really means to be present. But this isn't a book of lofty philosophy. It's full of practical ways to bring awareness into ordinary life, turning moments we usually rush through into moments that wake us up. Today, we are going to dive into a few of the key ideas from this book and how they can help us show up more fully for life, not just in meditation, but in every step we take. And so for me, this book was kind of broken up into two different parts. And if you haven't watched part one, I highly recommend you go back and watch that one, because that was about the vitality of mindfulness. But this episode is going to be about that second part that I took away from this book, the second kind of key principle of this book, which is really about the practice and discipline of mindfulness. So let's dive in and talk about it. All right, so in the second chapter of the book, which is titled The Miracle is to Walk on Earth, what Thich is kind of really pointing to here is how we can commit ourselves to meditation and mindfulness in our experience with life, in our day-to-day activities and what we kind of do on a day-to-day. And it kind of provides us with opportunities to practice mindfulness within the miracle of us walking on earth. So throughout this chapter, Thich is kind of bringing up these practices and ways we can utilize them. And I'm going to just discuss a couple here. So let's start off with the first one, which is about walking on this earth. And he starts by saying, when you're walking along a path leading into a village, you can practice mindfulness. Walking along a dirt path surrounded by the patches of green grass. If you practice mindfulness, you will experience that path, the path leading into the village. You practice by keeping this one thought alive. I am walking along the path leading into the village. But not just repeating it like a machine over and over again. Machine-like thinking is the opposite of mindfulness. If we're really engaged in mindfulness while walking along the path to the village, then we will consider the act of each step we take as an infinite wonder, and the joy will open our hearts like a flower, enabling us to enter the world of reality. And he finishes this off by saying, every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes. All is a miracle. I mean, the one thing I really like about this, and it's very true, as we're walking, we can experience each step one by one, feel them, be with them every moment. I've heard about like walking meditation and I've even tried to practice it. But I feel like meditation can often just get this rap of it being so serious, it being so important. And like we talked about last episode, it's like seen as like vital, which I think, as we talked about, it is. There is a vital aspect to mindfulness and meditation. However, the way it should be practiced isn't one of such seriousness. The best way to practice is kind of what he's pointing to here. There's a curiosity, there's a wonder, there's a joy, because when you're truly present with what's around you and what's within you, you see all the wonders that are within and around. You start to get curious and open about just how beautiful the world is around us. Like kind of what he says here. Consider the act of each step we take as an infinite wonder, and a joy will open our hearts like a flower. When we are almost, maybe like grateful is the right word, but when we are grateful and we are truly present with just the aspect of walking and how it feels to walk, then almost like this joy opens up in you that I am here walking this earth, this miracle. Like it's a miracle that I'm here walking. And I believe that this is such a key way to really practice mindfulness. It isn't something that should be so doom, gloom, serious, but something that should fill you up with joy because it's a miracle that you're here now. And so he is going to talk here about the sitting meditation, but he starts by talking about this aspect of time and how people might not have time to just spend here now. And so he starts by saying, but active, concerned people don't have time to spend leisurely, walking along paths of green grass and sitting beneath trees. One must prepare projects, consult with neighbors, try to resolve a million difficulties. There's hard work to do. You might as well ask, then, how are we to practice mindfulness? It's a good question. My answer is keep your attention focused on the work. Be alert and ready to handle ably and intelligently any situation which may arise. This is mindfulness. During the moment one is consulting, resolving, and dealing with whatever arises, a calm heart and self control are necessary if one is to obtain good results. Anyone can see that. If we are not in control of ourselves, but instead let our impatience or anger interfere, then our work is no longer of any value. Mindfulness is the miracle by which we master and restore ourselves. It is the miracle which can call back in a flash or disperse mind and restore it to wholeness so that we can live each minute of life. I mean, I don't know. There's a couple parts of this section that I just really enjoyed. The first being, it's kind of a breath of fresh air to see that you don't need to just be sitting all day out on a retreat by yourself to really be mindful. You can be working. You can be doing hard work. Cause I think that's like always a kind of like dilemma, that this aspect of I don't necessarily have the time today to do my meditation practice. And what Tick is saying here is okay, that's fine. Mindfulness should also be practiced within your work. You should be mindful with how you are handling every situation intelligently and present with where you are. And he talks about how, like, if you don't have the presence when you're doing your work, you're doing it in a way to just rush to get it done, maybe not doing it intelligently, maybe not doing it with like the self control. And you aren't doing this with a still and calm, present mind and heart. And that in order to get the results that we are all seeking, you need to be able to do this from a place of mindfulness. And so, he's pointing to how the practice of mindfulness is key. I mean, and you don't need to be doing it simply through meditation of sitting or walking. You could just be doing it within your day to day. And I thought this was kind of just a breath of fresh air of him kind of like acknowledging this. Now, the last practice that he talks about is really kind of just taking hold of one's breath. And he starts by saying, you should know how to breathe to maintain mindfulness, as breathing is a natural and extremely effective tool which can prevent dispersion. Breath is the bridge which connects life to consciousness. which unites your body to your thoughts. Whenever your mind becomes scattered, use your breath as the means to take hold of your mind again. The Sutra of Mindfulness teaches the method to take hold of one's breath in the following manner. Be ever mindful, you breathe in, and mindful, you breathe out. Breathing in a long breath, you know, I am breathing in a long breath. Breathing out a long breath, you know, I am breathing out a long breath. Breathing in a short breath, you know, I'm breathing in a short breath. Breathing out a short breath, you know, I am breathing out a short breath. And here, I believe that he's really saying that the breath is the one thing that we can always come back to, because as long as we're living, we're breathing. And so this is always something that no matter what we're doing, when we're working, while we're walking, our breath is always that one consistent that we could come back to stillness, to come back to our center. I think one thing that is like very key is like this aspect of how breath is that bridge that connects our consciousness and kind of really unites our body to our thoughts, which I think he does a really good job here kind of explaining of how to be able to do that, of acknowledging your breath where it is. Breathing in a long breath, you acknowledge I am breathing in a long breath. Breathing out a long breath, you acknowledge I'm breathing out a long breath. And that alone kind of brings you to center. Even as I'm kind of saying it right now, I feel myself kind of starting to fall into the present moment. So these are some practices in which Tick says can bring us step back down into the present moment. It can ground us in the present moment. This moment, no matter what we are doing, is a miracle if you look at it through the lens of presence. It's through this creative outlook of life that makes the practice of mindfulness a joyful pursuit. And it really also just makes our lives filled with ones of joy and bliss. And now, kind of going into the next section of the practice of mindfulness, a special revelation of mindfulness is its ability to reflect the harmony and interconnectedness of nature and of all things. When we are truly present and in tune with ourselves and the world around us, we realize we are not separate from the world, but rather we are one. Tick illustrates this through his chapter about the five aggregates or the five dharmas. And here he starts by saying, while you sit in meditation, you can direct your concentration to contemplate on the interdependent nature of certain objects. We call a simple and ancient truth. The subject of knowledge cannot exist independently from the object of knowledge. To see is to see something. To hear is to hear something. To be angry is to be angry over something. When the object of knowledge, the something, is not present, there can be no subject of knowledge. The practitioner meditates on mind, and by so doing, is able to see the independence of the subject of knowledge and the object of knowledge. When we practice mindfulness of breath, then the knowledge of breath is mind. When we practice mindfulness of body, then the knowledge of body is mind. Therefore, the contemplation of the nature of independence of all objects is also the contemplation of the mind. Every object of the mind is itself mind. In Buddhism, we call the objects of mind the dharmas. Dharmas are usually grouped into five categories. 1, bodily and physical forms. 2, feelings. 3, perceptions. 4, mental functionings. 5, consciousness. And so this is a little confusing. I'm not gonna lie, y'all. I had to read this kind of like a couple times to be able to even just wrap my head around it. I can't tell you guys I understand it fully still. I'm probably gonna have to read this 100 times to really understand it. I guess to kind of like paint the picture of how I took it. So pretty much what this is all about and what the five dharmas is about is that these five things are our ways of interacting with the world around us. This is our way of perceiving the world. And thus, these are kind of like the things that are the subject that is interacting with some object. And so he kind of talks about here you are conscious of the presence of bodily form, feeling, perception, mental functionings, and consciousness, the five dharmas. So we are conscious of the presence of them. You observe these objects until you see that each of them has intimate connection with the world outside yourself. If the world did not exist, then the assembly of the five aggregates could not exist either. So once again, these are the five things kind of interacting with the world around us. And he continues by saying, you meditate on the assembly of the five aggregates in yourself in the same manner. You meditate on them until you are able to see the presence of the reality of oneness in your own self. You can see that your own life and the life of the universe are one. Each second, the world nourishes the five aggregates. The self is no different from the assembly of the five aggregates. And so it is through this connection of the five aggregates that we are able to interact with the world around us. And then it is through this interaction and the meditation of this interaction that makes us realize that we are connected to the universe, and thus that the universe is connected to us. We are not separate, but we are one. And then this all is what kind of makes up our vision of the self. Tick kind of continues into this next chapter, and this is where the introduction comes from. So I'm going to repeat that line, but he talks about the liberation from suffering. People normally cut reality into compartments and so are unable to see the interdependence of all phenomena. To see one in all and all in one is to break through the great barrier which narrows one's perceptions of reality, a barrier which Buddhism calls the attachment to false view of self. Attachment to the false view of self means belief in the presence of unchanging entities which exists on their own. A person isn't some private entity, traveling unaffected through time and space, as if sealed off from the rest of the world by a thick shell. Living for 100 or for 100,000 lives, sealed off like that, not only isn't living, but it is impossible. In our lives are present a multitude of phenomena. Just as we ourselves are present in many different phenomena, we are life, and life is limitless. Perhaps one can say that we are only alive when we live the life of the world, and so live the sufferings and joys of others. And so here, I mean, what Tick is kind of saying is when we attach and cling to beliefs of our existence, we are unable to really see the harmony of all the phenomena at play, because there are so many phenomena in play with any given circumstance that we ourselves cannot fully comprehend it. There is just so many different things that are all interconnected that when we try to create a story for it, that is just a limitation. That's just like a very small point of view of what is actually taking place. But when we kind of are accepting of the whole interconnected nature of it, it's not like we're even really trying to understand it. We're just allowing the harmony to play out as the harmony plays out, knowing that there's way too many phenomena for us to be able to comprehend. I mean, take kind of points here. Meditation on interdependence is to be practiced constantly, not only while sitting, but as an integral part of our involvement in all ordinary tasks. We must learn to see that the person in front of us is ourself and that we are that person. So Tick paints a beautiful picture of the harmony that is within and around us, and that this practice of meditating on the five aggregates to withdraw the interconnectedness of all things is a way to break free from the suffering that we place on ourselves through our senses. But it can also really help to liberate us from our attachments to certain ideas that might not even be ours to begin with. They might just be passed down from culture, from society, from our parents. But through this meditation of the harmony of all things, we are able to really kind of break free from limited views because we realize that there's more in play than we can even imagine. And so now, kind of closing into like this last part, this chapter is called The Almond Tree in Your Front Yard. And really in this chapter, Tick shows how practice of meditation can free us from our illusions or the stories that we limit the universe to. And that through practice of opening our heart and soul, we can not only open ourselves to the world around us, but we can also liberate ourselves from the suffering of these limited mindsets. And so he starts by saying, according to an insight of our tradition, reality has three natures: imagination, interdependence, and the nature of ultimate perfection. So he then kind of continues by breaking down each one. He starts, imagination is an illusion of reality, which conceives of reality as an assembly of small pieces of separate entities and selves. In order to break through, the practitioner meditates on the nature of interdependence or the interrelatedness of phenomena in the process of creation and destruction. And so this kind of is kind of pointing back to what we were talking about in that last part about meditating on the interconnectedness. What he's saying here is that the base level is the imagination, what is really passed down to us, our viewpoints, the stories that we create, the stories that we were handed down from, like I said, our culture, our parents, whoever. And in a way, this is all imagination because it's not acknowledging the whole picture that's at play. You're just trying to create a story to like make it all make sense to you, but it's not what is really at play here. And what that next level is the interdependence of everything. And that's kind of what Tick continues on here. The meditation on interdependence is to help one penetrate reality in order to be one with it, not to become caught up in philosophical opinion or meditation methods. The raft is used to cross the river. It isn't to be carried around your shoulders. The finger which points to the moon isn't the moon itself. So, this is the meditation of interdependence, how things are related to each other. Finally, one proceeds to the nature of the ultimate perfection, reality freed from all false views produced by the imagination. Reality is reality. And I guess, what does that mean? Tick puts it like this. He starts by saying, when reality is perceived in its nature of ultimate perfection, the practitioner has reached a level of wisdom called non-discrimination mind, a wondrous communion in which there is no longer any distinction made between subject and object. So, here in the nature of ultimate perfection, it's about no longer having a distinction between subject, in this case, maybe you, and the object, whatever you are thinking, talking about. Tick kind of continues from this part and then goes into this idea of the almond tree. When reality is experienced in the nature of ultimate perfection, an almond tree that may be in your front yard reveals its nature in perfect wholeness. Of all the people who have passed by your yard, how many have really seen the almond tree? The heart of an artist may be more sensitive. Hopefully, he or she will be able to see the tree in a deeper way than many others. Because of a more open heart, a certain communion already exists between the artist and the tree. If your heart is not clouded by false views, you will be able to enter a natural communion with the tree. And so, here, that what the ultimate perfection is to become unified with you and the object that you are perceiving. It's not about a distinction, a separation. It's not a like story of what is going on in the world around us. It's really a communion. It's acknowledging that we are all interconnected, that we are all one. And he says that if your heart is not clouded by the false views, you will be able to enter a natural communion with that tree. And I think in a way that the tree also might represent people. You know, if your heart is not clouded by false views, if your heart isn't clouded by the stories that you've created, by thoughts, by emotions, you'll be able to enter a natural communion with the people that you deal with, which I think is something that our world needs more of right now. And so that is kind of explaining what the reality of ultimate perfection is. It's really about acknowledging the unity of all things. And he then continues on in a different section. And this section is called The Voice of the Rising Tide. He starts by saying, when your mind is liberated, your heart floods with compassion. Compassion for yourself for having undergone countless sufferings because you were not yet able to relieve yourself of false views, hatred, ignorance, and anger. And compassion for others because they do not yet see and so are still imprisoned by false views, hatred, and ignorance, and continue to create suffering for themselves and for others. And I really think that compassion should be a pillar to mindfulness because It is through the practice of mindfulness that we begin to have compassion and grace for ourselves. And we have that grace of the thoughts, the emotions, the hatred that, like I said, might not even be ours to begin with, but we start to have compassion and grace for ourselves for feeling that way because we understand that at that point we were unable to really liberate ourselves from that. But through the practice of mindfulness, here, Tick is kind of pointing to that we can really free ourselves from this suffering. And it's in this process that we start to have compassion for the people around us who, might be caught up in hateful, imprisoning views. So he continues by saying, practice looking at all beings with the eyes of compassion. This is the meditation called the meditation on compassion. The meditation on compassion must be realized during the hours you sit and during every moment you carry out service for others. And so through service, you must also be practicing compassion and kind of meeting people where they are and being compassionate for where they are. He continues, work is only part of life, but work is life only when done in mindfulness. Otherwise, one can become like the person who lives as though dead. We need to light our own torch in order to carry on. But the life of each one of us is connected with the life of those around us. If we know how to live life in mindfulness, if we know how to preserve and care for our own mind and heart, then thanks to that, our brothers and sisters will also know how to live in mindfulness. And man, I mean, I love this point. It's like if we are able to care for our own mind and heart, then through this, we are teaching others how to care for their own mind and heart. Because as we have been talking about, we are all interconnected. So when we are approaching someone with a cared for mind and heart, when we are approaching someone through mindfulness, then they themselves get to understand what mindfulness is through that interaction. And because of this, it really is kind of once again kind of pointing to the vitality of what mindfulness is all about. That when we are able to approach one another through mindfulness and meditation, how we are really able to share it and pass it on, which I think is key. And like I said many times in this episode, is needed right now. And finally, I'm going to wrap up this section about the practice and discipline of mindfulness by talking about what Tick says here is the meditation that meditation reveals and heals. And he starts this section by saying, sitting in mindfulness, both our bodies and minds can be at peace and totally relax. But this state of peace and relaxation differs fundamentally from the lazy semi-conscious state of mind that one gets while resting and dozing. Sitting in such lazy semi-consciousness, far from being mindfulness, is like sitting in a dark cave. In mindfulness, one is not only restful and happy, but alert and awake. Meditation is not evasion, it is a serene encounter with reality. And this is kind of what mindfulness is to him. Meditation is not evasion, it is a serene encounter with reality. He continues, for beginners, I recommend the method of pure recognition. Recognition without judgment, feelings, whether of compassion or irritation, should be welcomed and recognized and treated on absolutely equal basis because both are ourselves. This was like what we talked about in the last episode with the aspect of the guard and the visitor. We are both of those. We are observing thoughts and emotions as they come in, but we also acknowledge that we are one with them. From here, he continues, when possessed by sadness, an anxiety, a hatred, or a passion, or whatever, the method of pure observation and recognition may seem difficult to practice. If so, turn to meditation on a fixed object, using your own state of mind as the meditation subject. The sadness or anxiety, hatred or passion under the gaze of concentration and meditation reveals its own nature, a revelation that leads naturally to healing and emancipation. Not resisting it, but living with it, making peace with it, penetrating into its nature by meditation on interdependence. This is so powerful. It is something that I've really just learned for the first time recently after reading this book. And I've kind of begun to see it throughout all the different readings that have followed. But to recognize the feelings without becoming attached or creating stories is unlocked. And we've kind of talked about this in the last episode too, but it's very hard to do. We have never really learned how to address emotions and thoughts like this. And here, Tick is really pointing to that by meditating on the emotions as the subject, by using that as the focus, by being so present in that thought and that emotion, the nature of that thought and emotion reveals itself ever so clearly. Like for me, when I've kind of have done this practice, I've realized that sometimes the anxieties I have aren't my anxieties. It's anxieties that I have kind of picked up along the way of life. It might be something that was passed down to me through teaching. I guess to wrap up this episode, I just want to bring up again that through our lives, we all have been passed down different limited beliefs and views that we have attached to. In many ways, our self has become attached to these thoughts, emotions, whatever it is, because it gives us a stance within a very complicated world. But as Tick has kind of pointed to, the universe is way more complicated. It's way more interconnected than we can simply even comprehend. We can feel it maybe through meditation, but we can't comprehend it. We can't communicate about it because it's not so black and white as the stories that we tell ourselves. Through the practice of mindfulness, we begin to observe just how vast and connected everything is, how in harmony our universe is. It might not provide definitive clarity in the sense of it's a way for us to communicate it to others or even to ourselves, but provides clarity that although there is much we don't know, we're all connected in a harmonious relationship. This kind of sounds woo-woo a little bit, but in its simplest form, there is a lot of truth behind it. Everything is dependent on something else to be here in this present moment, in its present form. And if you continue to break things down to this very macro level, you will see just how connected all these details are to each other. And so through this, like I said, although it doesn't provide clarity, it can provide clarity in the sense of that that you know that things are so interconnected, that you know that there is a harmony at play, that you know that there are things at play bigger than yourself. And in this sense, peace, grounding, and mindfulness can follow. So I hope that you all can find this harmonious interconnectedness with you to the world around you, as Tick points to. And as usual, I thank you for sharing your presence and your energy here and now. And until next time, stay grounded, my friends. Aloha.